Hare Krishna. Welcome back to 50 years in ISKCON. Some talks about my experiences and how things went on over the years in ISKCON. And also just a reminder that I'm not giving here any kind of comprehensive history at all. I'm just going through the years and I see what jumps out at me as something that I may want to share. So we're up to where we 2000. We started one talk from 2000, the year 2000 to 2005, and now I will continue with that time. Quite a lot of things happened during those years, so we'll stick with it for a while. So sometime during this year, and before I begin, let me please first offer my respectful obeisances to all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha, Kripasindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha, and to Srila Prabhupada. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Bhaskachade Satarne. So sometime during this year, I think it was this year or close to it, so like I said, this is not precise history, but sometime during this year, there was a devotee from Australia. Her name was Bhavapriya, and she left her body in Mayapur. Now, as far as I know, she was the first Western lady to leave her body in Mayapur. And I'm going to tell her story because it taught us a lot, and it was very inspirational. So when Bhavapriya came to Mayapur, I didn't know her prior to this. I think my husband might have. She was already in the late stage of cancer, I think maybe leukemia. And she was maybe in her early 50s, I'm speculating, but not real old. I guess that's a relative term. Now in my 70s, 50 is young. But she came to stay till the end of her days. That was her intention. She was a very simple devotee. And the first time I met her, she was sitting in front of the temple and eating pizza from the Maha shop. And she didn't look at all sick. Later I found out that she had been given a full blood transfusion to be able to take the trip, so that may be why she looked so good. And when I met her and talked to her, she very nonchalantly said, "Yeah, I came to Mayapur to die. I have late stage cancer." And she said it so lightheartedly, as if, "Yeah, I'm going down to the corner store to get some bread." It was like very light. And I was thinking, oh boy, she doesn't have a clue yet. She's got a long way to go. And, I came to this conclusion because I'd seen a few devotees go through many stages before their departure, before leaving their bodies. So I just jumped to an erroneous assumption that she was kind of clueless. And but anyway, some ladies had heard about her situation, so they were suggesting that we make a schedule to begin to read to her. But I thought, well, it's a little premature. It's not so easy to keep people coming regularly on a schedule over a long period of time. So I said, well, maybe we should wait a little bit till she's a little further along. So she continued to look quite well for some time. And one day, on my way back from the morning program, I just popped in to see her. And for the first time, I saw her laying down on the couch. And I asked, well, how are you doing? And she said, well, I'm not really feeling so well today. And she didn't look so bad, and she didn't sound so bad, so I didn't think much of it. I wasn't alarmed. But when I left the apartment, I ran into her neighbor, Ananga Manjari, and I just mentioned that Bhava Priya doesn't feel well today. You know, maybe you can drop in and give her some company, you know. So I went home, and I didn't think about it at all again, another thought. And later, you know, a couple hours later, I was preparing lunch when a young girl came to the door, and she came to ask me for something. I can't remember what it was. And I was like, well, how come you came here, and why do you need this? And she said, well, Bhava Priya just left her body. And I was, what? You know, I'm just there a few hours ago. And I was utterly shocked. And so I rushed over there, and word spread, and many devotees came to her apartment to, you know, offer their respects and to prepare to take her to the Ganges for her final rites eventually. Take some time to prepare these things. But later, Ananga Manjari explained this amazing story of what had happened. And she said that after I told her about Bhava Priya, she just had a strong feeling that she should go see her. So when she went into her room, she just had this very strong, intuitive sense that she's maybe going to leave her body very soon. If you know Ananga, she's a very in tune kind of person. And you know, in retrospect and looking back, you know, it's clear that Krishna just sent her there. He sent her there to take care of Bhava Priya, to be there with her. So she decided, you know, as soon as she came over, she just decided she was going to stay with her. And she connected somehow with Bhava Priya's grown son, who came at some point. He arrived there, so it's the two of them. So, so then Ananga explained that, you know, eventually she was just feeling worse and worse, and she wanted to lay down in her bed. And it seemed like Bhava Priya understood that, yeah, she's going to leave. Now's the time. And so she told Ananga, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of leaving my body. And I think now is the time. And so Ananga was like, well, what's the concern? What are you afraid of? And she said, well, I don't know. What am I going to do when I leave my body? If I go to the spiritual world, and, you know, what am I going to do there? And as I said, she's like a very, very simple person, just kind of very open and very sincere. And Ananga Manjari, she just knew the comforting words to say. And she said, well, Bhava, you always have loved to serve the devotees, right? She's like, yeah, that's what I like. And she said, and you love to cook for the devotees? And she's like, yeah, that's what I like. I like to do that. And so Ananga said, so that's what you're going to do. You're going to cook and serve the devotees and Radha and Krishna. And won't it be wonderful? And, you know, Bhava Priya, she just took that in so innocently, fully accepting, and she was like, yes, yes, and she became so peaceful. And so, you know, gradually she started to show more signs of her body shutting down. And then again, Bhava expressed some anxiety, that she was frightened, that, you know, it would be too painful. And again, Ananga expertly guided her, and she said, no, you can make it, Bhava, no problem. You know, you gave birth, didn't you? didn't you give birth to your son? Yeah, I did, And that was really difficult for a while, wasn't it? Oh, yes, it was. But Ananga says it wasn't so long. And then the most wonderful thing happened, and that you had your beautiful son in your hands, and you just forgot all about the pain, right? And Bava was, yeah, that is true. That's true. So Ananga was like, no problem. You're strong. You can do it. Just a short little bit of pain, and then the most wonderful thing that exists is going to happen to you. And then you're going to see Radha and Krishna, and all the pain will be gone, and you'll be in ecstasy. And again, Bava, she was just totally took that in fully to heart, and she was completely pacified. She just accepted these words, and she was peaceful. And then, Ananga continued to talk to her, to comfort her. And later she told me, she said, I don't know where these words came from, but it really turned out to be the right ones, and so true and so appropriate. And so she said, Bhava Priya, you are going to get so much mercy from Lord Nityananda. And Bhava Priya said, really? Why? And Ananga said, but he really likes simple devotees. And he will be so pleased with you and how you like to serve the devotees and how you just simply like to do that. And this gave her so much relief and so much pleasure. And shortly after this, she softly breathed her last breath. But before they could even move from the spot or acknowledge her departure, Rachitambra, I think it was Rachitambra, suddenly entered the apartment. And she had no idea at all what was going on. She just stopped in to see her. And as she walked in, she called out, Bhava Priya, I just came from Ekachakra, and I brought you this big garland from Lord Nityananda. And she had this huge garland. And as she approached the bed, she was stunned to see, oh my God, she's gone? And just now, just this minute. And so she just bent down and draped that huge Lord Nityananda garland over her whole body. And, all of them knew without any doubt that she indeed had pleased Lord Nityananda and had received his special mercy. And so word of her, that her departure spread, and eventually there was the procession to the Ganga, and that was something amazing, unexpected. It was more like a jubilant festival than a sad departure. Everyone was just looking so happy, feeling so happy, and everyone felt something special's going on here. And so we reached the Ganga, and her body was laid out, and then we saw there was a double rainbow that circled above the place where she had been laid out. And then this very soft, light drops of rain started to fall while the sun was brightly shining. And that they call in India a divyasnan, a divine shower. It's something auspicious, And everyone present saw this is something wonderful. And they were, wow, this woman, she is very fortunate. So her departure, it was the topic of a few Srimad Bhagavatam classes for a few days. The topics of how we should not judge devotees, and how we do not know the soul's relationship with the Lord. How often we just see only the externals, but we don't know the heart of others, and we don't know how the Lord feels about that devotee. And I personally felt so humbled. I had judged her. I was thinking, oh, she's such a simple, should I say simpleton, terrible, you know, and I felt terrible, and many others also felt chastened by this, you know. What do we know about another person's heart? And there was just no doubt, everyone saw it, everyone agreed that she had to be a special soul to have this kind of mercy, just to come to Mayapur and to get Lord Nityananda's special grace. And it was a powerful lesson. That's why I tell, you know, stories that I think are powerful lessons. For many of us, that how careful we have to be about judging others, you know. You know, we just don't know. Some of us may be, you know, right on the edge of returning to the spiritual realm in 5 minutes. And some of us might have, you know, many, many, many lifetimes before reaching that destination. So we really don't know, and we should be careful. So that was the story of Baba Priya. Now, you know, sometime, I don't know if it was late 99 or early 2000, we decided to try staying in Australia, you know, for a good portion of the year, and then a few months in India. The reason is that Harisori had been going over there, collecting, doing some business and things to provide for the family, and it's a bit hard, you know, by himself. So we decided we'd try staying at New Govardhan, the farm near the Gold Coast, a couple of hours from Brisbane. And I think I mentioned it before that it's something like 700 acres with big hills, and, you know, probably certainly one of the most beautiful properties that in ISKCON, you know. So, and Harisori had had some involvement in getting it back in the early 70s. And the project itself had been through some highs and some lows. And at the time when we went there, it was like a little low, but maybe moving upwards, doing a little better. But it was a gorgeous place, and it had a nice devotee school, you know, which is, you know, what parents look for. And so while we were there, we tried to revive a bus tour program. Previously, many years before, Harisori had been aware that there was a thriving bus program with many visitors coming very frequently to the farm. And it was, you know, it brought life to the farm, you know, that's preaching. And that wasn't going on. So we tried to redevelop that for some time. And we got it going a bit, but it didn't really take off, you know, it didn't really get off the ground significantly, and it didn't continue after we stopped. But, you know, that's what we were doing for a little while. And in general, the mood with the Aussies is just really relaxed. You know, it's kind of a beach culture there, live and let live. And the devotee culture was perhaps a bit more relaxed than other places I had lived. And I was surprised when I found out that the local movie theater in town was owned by a devotee, and that devotees ran the pizzeria inside it. And then if you stopped in there, you were likely to run into a number of devotees. So this was kind of a new thing to me. I hadn't, up to that point, you know, this is like 30 years down the line, 70s, 80s, and 90s. I hadn't gone to the movies for all those years. I think maybe twice it might have happened. And yeah, I never thought about it. I didn't miss it, or But, you know, there I was, it's a different mood there, and you could see how easy it is to fall into the flow of what others are comfortable doing, and how easy it is to sort of lower the bar. So, you know, I had new experiences there. But it was nice. It was nice to go into that small town, and you would see devotees everywhere in all varieties of attire also. You had to kind of, the only way you could tell is by looking if they had some neck beads on. But it was pleasant, and it was a relaxing place. And on the farm, there were beautiful deities of Radha Govardhan and exquisite Krishna Balaram in a unique pose, and Gaura Nitai. And I'm not totally sure of the year, but we were there. It must have been the 20th anniversary of the installation of Radha Govardhan. So during that festival day, my husband was giving the talk, and he was explaining how he ordered the deities in Jaipur, and then he went back and picked them up and brought them here. And I'm listening, and then suddenly, I was absolutely stunned. I looked over at Radha Govardhan and I realized these are the deities that I had carved for New Mayapur, France, so many years ago. But they had been taken by someone else before I came to pick them up. I described this event back in probably the late 70s talks. So, and I explained how I'd gone to Jaipur many times to oversee the making of the deities, to make sure everything was nice. And then when I arrived to pick them up, the ones I had worked on were gone, and they'd been given to someone else. And I was so upset at the time that, you know, I never even wondered what had happened to those deities. You know, it didn't matter. I had to deal with the present situation. And, but now, you know, 20 years later, I'm sitting in class, and I flashed on a remembrance of seeing my husband when he was a sannyasi, and he was in Jaipur ordering deities at the same time that I was ordering the deities for New Mayapur. And now he's sitting there explaining how he ordered them, and you know, they were supposed to be finished in 6 months, so he just came back after 6 months and assuming they would be made. I mean, that's not really how it works in India. And there they were. They were all ready to go, very beautiful deities, so he never thought again about it, you know. And, you know, in fact, the Murtiwala hadn't even started on his deities. But here was a man with money in hand, expecting his work to be done. And so, as most businessmen would do, he gave him the New Mayapur deities that I had worked hard to have made. And he was thinking that I will just quickly make another set before Sitala arrives to pick them up. So, wow, I was stunned. And right in the middle of the class, I just blurted out loud, "Prabhu, you're the one who took my deities." And everyone's like looking at me, kind of amazed by this outburst. And they listened all, you know, highly amused by this tale as it unfolded, as my husband and I discussed back and forth there how this had taken place. And so, you know, the story unfolded to the surprise of everyone there, and there was just no doubt that Radha Govardhan were definitely the deities I had worked on, and it was pretty amazing. And well, apparently they wanted to come to Australia, and it was wonderful to see them worship there very beautifully. So that was an interesting event while I was there. Another event which took place while I was in Australia is one day some devotees ran into the temple room and they were saying there's some attack on New York City and that, 2 planes had just flown into the Twin Towers in New York and knocked them down. So, many devotees rushed to one devotee's house who had a TV, and we watched this most surreal and bizarre event of 9/11, and it truly felt like we were watching just some crazy movie, And of course, everyone was speculating why this was happening, who's doing it, and what's behind it, and what's really going on, But being in Australia, they're so kind of far down under, as they say. It didn't impact them in the way that it would, of course, for United States and other countries closer. But it was I just mentioned because, probably everybody remembers, it was a very, very shocking experience to watch over and over. They kept showing it. And, still not sure what to make of it all. But around this time, also, my husband was having some personal difficulties, which spanned over some years and which I will explain later. But eventually, we decided that although Australia was a great place to visit, Rasarani and I longed to be back in the Dham, so we eventually moved back to Mayapur full-time, although we did regularly visit Australia over the years. So then soon, Rasarani and I were back in Vrindavan at Kartik time to do my regular Didi Seva. So while I was riding on a rickshaw with my daughter, and I just said, hey, hon, she must have been 8 or 9 around this time. So I said, it's Kartik, you want to do anything special this year? So I was really surprised. Without any hesitation, she said, yes, I want to go to the plot every day. I described this in the last talk, the Padasevana Park I previously described. This beautiful, peaceful place where there were the feet of all of the acharyas to be worshipped, seats for them. And she said, I want to go there every day and I want to wash the lotus feet of all the spiritual masters and then offer them fresh water. And I was, really, that's what you want to do? I was pretty surprised. And she had this sudden, very clear idea of what she wanted to do. And it sounded like a great idea. So I said, okay. So that is what we did every day in Kartik. Because I didn't realize that it was going to take quite a bit of time and be a lot of work, actually. It was kind of exhausting. But throughout that time, it was really beautiful. And I just felt like I was assisting my daughter in doing this vrat. I mean, she had this clear and precise idea of how she wanted to do it. And she was, just bossing me around, telling me how to do it, and I was just following her lead. So this is one of those times when a parent really gets a glimpse of their child as not being their child at all, as just a soul, as a devotee completely in their own right, with their own past and their own relationship with the Lord. And, so during this rut, I felt more like she was guiding me and I was just assisting her. And, as they say, sometimes they say the child becomes like the parent. And in this case it was. And it was truly blissful and purifying to just meditate on each personality, each acharya, go before them, pour the water on their feet. I think it was, like imprinted in marble. And then we'd wash and then wipe them. And then we had little clay, new clay pots every day to fill and give them water, and then bow down to each sitting place and say their names and prayers. And there was quite a lot of seats for acharyas, so it took a while. But it was really a wonderful thing to do, wonderful meditation. And then at the end of it, you know, the last day of Kartika, I thanked her. I said, that was a great idea, honey. And she said, we're not finished. So, okay, what do we have to do? She said, well, we have to go to Prabhupada, and we have to offer all the results of the vrat for Papi, for her father. She called him Papi. And so that's what we did. And frankly, I was stunned. As I said, my husband was having some difficulties, but it wasn't necessarily anything visible. I don't know, and I still don't know, whether somehow she just understood in her heart that there was a problem, or if she had heard something. I don't know. But that was, you know, her way of correcting things. It was very beautiful and profound experience, and very, just so nice that that was her intention, to help her father. And no doubt, I have no doubt, that blessing would have gone to him. It was sincere, you know. Now by 2002, we were back in Mayapur, and well, personally, I had become a little bit concerned about the Mayapur project, you know, how this whole mega city plan was going to unfold. And I remember talking with Abhiram Prabhu, who was in charge of the master plan at that time. And he also was wondering how and when it would be possible to really start to bring this to the ground, you know, because plans had been underway for years. And so this year, at the GBC meetings, for the first time in quite a while, I think quite some years, Tamal Krishna Maharaj attended the GBC meetings. And he'd been in academia for a long time, and he had told my husband that he was quite fed up with that, but he wasn't sure what he was going to do next, you know. So later on, after the GBC, after one GBC meeting, Abhiram told me that during the meetings where they gave a whole presentation about what's going on with the Mayapur project, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was not happy to see that things seemed to just not be moving forward, even in all the years that he'd not been around. So he decided at that point, knowing the importance of the Mayapur project, how important it was to Srila Prabhupada, he decided that this is what he wanted to dedicate himself to now, this big mega project. And you know, so Abhiram told us this great news, and we were so happy. It just seemed perfect. You know, he was just the right person. He had so much prior experience in managing and developing leading projects, especially in India. He was very close friends with Abhiram. So we were just relieved and happy. You know, finally it looks like the project's going to take off. And the next day, Tamal Krishna Maharaj left Mayapur. And as we all know, there was a sudden accident and he departed this world. And it was so shocking that I'm not going to try to explain those devastating days that followed. It just was a very painful time for everyone. But one interesting thing I will convey, which happened when they were bringing Maharaj's body, driving in a van back to Mayapur, somehow word had reached nearby villages that some great devotee had departed, and he was in this vehicle that was passing by. So a huge crowd of locals forcibly stopped the van, and they wouldn't allow it to move unless they were allowed. They wanted the van doors to be open. They wanted to be allowed to offer their respects and to touch the feet of this sadhu. And they were so determined that, you know, they had no choice but to just kind of allow that to happen. And it's just an example of, you know, the extraordinary nature of the people in India, you know, that somehow they understand, you know, the value, the importance, and the power of a sadhu. It's really quite remarkable. Anyway, his departure, naturally, it deeply affected everyone. He was a major pillar of ISKCON, like Srila Prabhupada's right-hand man. And whether you had a good relationship with him or not, no one could deny the massive extent of the service that he had rendered, and just how much he'd done to help build ISKCON. So, you know, putting him into Samadhi, it was a very sobering experience. And I remember my daughter getting right in front, you know, just wanting to be in the front and watching everything so closely. And I was wondering, you know, gosh, maybe I should go and pull her away. Maybe it's not appropriate, you know. But then I said, no, you know, this is the real education. You know, these are the real life lessons, you know. So I left her there. And later, you know, again was speaking with Abhiram Prabhu in our apartment, and we just sat there just so utterly puzzled and devastated and disappointed. So much for our grand ideas of how the Mayapur city would unfold. And, you know, there are times in life when you just know you cannot understand the will or the plan of Krishna. And despite disappointment, we just have to know that things are in Krishna's hands, despite whatever we might have thought was a great plan. Anyway, one more thing I would like to note regarding Tamal Krishna Maharaj's last visit to Mayapur is that, you know, after he had had these years of somewhat dry academic work, he was really eager and enthusiastic to be immersed in kirtan. So when the GBC meetings would be over, he was having kirtans in his own room, and, you know, just initially inviting some of his friends for some soul-stirring kirtans. And but these kirtans were so special that word started to spread more and more about them, and more devotees started to attend them. And, you know, in retrospect, we're seeing that this seems to have been the beginning of the Kirtan Mela phenomena that would eventually sweep the world. You know, that it began in Tamal Krishna Maharaj's room, and then it was brought out into the temple room and beyond. So all glories to Tamal Krishna Maharaj and all of his contributions. Anyway, now we're up to around 2003. There was a happy event for me anyway, that the Vrindadevi deity was installed in a new marble Vrindadevi deity I had ordered in Jaipur, was now brought to Vrindakund, and she was installed there in the beautiful new temple, and in that just magnificent, spiritually powerful and kind of secretive place, Vrindakund. So I was happy to be able to do some service to her. And then there was another event this year for our family that we finally, after so many years, we got our Krishna to go with our Radharani. I had told this story of how my daughter got Radharani when she was younger, some years ago. And somehow we just were not able to get Krishna. You know, when we went back, he wasn't carved nicely, and the next time when I went back, he was broken, and you know, many things happened. And you know, years were going by, and we're just worshiping Radharani alone. And you know, finally, this psychic Russian devotee, she said to me just out of the blue, she said, you know, you should get your daughter her Krishna before she's 12. It would be very good for her. You know, so I thought, oh, well, that sounds like wise advice. So I actually took our Radharani Didi back to Jaipur, and I sat her before the Murti well, and I said, look, here is Radharani. She's been waiting and waiting for her Krishna. You make him now. And he really got it, and he saw she's so beautiful, and he really wanted to do it. And he said, I'll do it right now. You know, so he did do very quickly. And so this was finally a wonderful new life in our house. We now had Radha Madhava. And Rasarani, she's a good pujari, and she continues to take care of them very nicely. So these were happy days for us. Now then we come to 2004, and I hope I have time that I can describe this, because this was one of the biggest years of my life, the installation of Panchatattva deities in Mayapur. This was a huge life-altering experience for many, and it was definitely, especially for me. So we had been hearing about the making of the deities for quite some time. And honestly, I wasn't particularly excited about it. I'm kind of a more practical person. I'm thinking, why are they making them so big? How are they going to keep them polished? And, you know, their outfits are going to be so expensive. And, you know, I'm just thinking in a rather mundane way. But however, my daughter, she just from the beginning, she seemed to be extremely interested and excited about these big deities. Even when we were in Australia, somehow she was keeping in touch with what was going on. And one day I overheard her talking to a few of her friends. You know, I mean, what, they're like 10 years old or something. A few of her friends telling them, you have to, she was really strongly saying, you have to convince your parents to go to Mayapur for Panchatattva's installation. And I was listening, you know, in the kitchen. I was just amazed and amused that she was so seriously pushing them. And she said, it's going to be a huge thing. And it's something like this. It just happens once in a day of Brahma. And I heard her say that, and I like had to stifle a laugh, you know, and I was like, oh my gosh, where did she get that from? But then, you know, a little voice inside of me said, what are you laughing about? She knows something you don't know. And so I was like, yeah, she seems to be really tuned in. So when we were back in Mayapur and the deities arrived on these huge trucks, and they were parked way down the road at the end of Bhaktisiddhanta Road in front of the Chaitanya Math. And it was early in the morning, and somehow Rasarani heard about it, and she got my friend Ramadevi to drive her on her scooter. She just jumped on the back and she said, we're going to see Panchatattva, and off they sped. And I was personally having a very bad arthritis day, and I was not feeling particularly good or enthusiastic about anything. But, you know, I was feeling, you know, I realized I should probably go down there. And so I mustered up some strength and I got on a rickshaw. But, you know, more out of duty than out of enthusiasm. And but I still remember that moment when the trucks came in sight. It was as if electricity just shot through me. I just bolted off that rickshaw, and I was just filled with this excitement and energy, and I rushed to one of the trucks, and I looked inside and I saw these massive outstretched arms of Mahaprabhu wrapped in cloth and plastic, but you could see him. And tears just shot uncontrollably out of my eyes. And I just was shocked by my reaction. You know, what is going on? Am I just like super menopausal, or, you know, overly emotional, and, you know, kind of searching for some practical reason for this unusual behavior? And then I looked to my right, and there was a brahmachari also gazing into the truck, and he had tears, you know, streaming down his face. And I just realized, wow, this is incredible. This is inexplicable. This is something very big is happening. And gradually, more and more devotees arrived until we were ready to begin the most ecstatic procession that I've ever experienced. And as those trucks, they were like rolling down slowly down the road, devotees were just wild, just dancing in bliss. And it really felt like a universal event. It really felt like the demigods and the previous acharyas were showering flowers and mercy. And it was just an overwhelming feeling. And I wouldn't even say anything like this if I hadn't heard so many other mature, serious devotees explain in the same way that they were having similar experiences. And, you know, it was just, I was laughing. I would see these like usually very kind of shy, sober, mature Bengali ladies were just like whooping and laughing and throwing flower petals wildly. It was extraordinary. And then when we finally arrived at the Panchatattva temple entrance, the unloading began. And this was an incredibly difficult process that took 3 days to complete. I mean, who knew how to do such a thing? Who had ever done anything like this? So each step was a challenge. You know, the deities weighed each one like 2.5 tons. And, you know, the first crane they tried to use to hoist Lord Chaitanya off of the truck, it was too small, and it almost like toppled over backwards holding Lord Chaitanya. And they had to get a bigger crane, had to be found, and when they finally got him off of the truck, he was placed on a flatbed trolley, and then the tires popped. He was just too heavy. I think it happened twice. And so this was no easy process. And then when they were finally going to bring the trolley carrying Lord Chaitanya into the temple, the doors weren't wide enough, so they had to knock down sections of the wall so that the deity can come in. And each step was just like grueling and scary and dangerous and exciting. And so each step was a learning experience, how to get them down a ramp and how to get them up a ramp. They had to, you know, put sandbags underneath the whole thing, and, you know, every step it was. And then they had to arrange a pulley from the ceiling in the deity room to lift them up into a standing position. And when that finally happened, you know, there were a lot less devotees around by that time. But those who were there, they were just roaring with delight, you know. And so it took the whole day just to get Lord Chaitanya up. So 2 more days were needed to bring the rest of the deities to their place on the altar. Now, Radharani was committed to staying there through the entire process, all 3 days. And she was keeping a diary, and she was taking photos the whole time. And she was just there, and I kept wondering, God, is she ever going to come home? Should I bring her something to eat? And I just thought, well, whatever, just let her do what she's doing. She's into it. And it was just something she just was not going to miss, and she was documenting it. And so it would be some days before the installation, and in the meantime, sometime around there, Sridhar Maharaj arrived, and he was coming to Mayapur to leave his body. And he had a real hero's welcome. He was helped along by Andradumna Swami and Jayapataka Swami, and hundreds of devotees greeted him. Even Gulab Kali, the elephant, was there. And he just begged the devotees to pray that he could stay alive long enough to see the installation of Panchatattva. That was his desire. So the devotees began to pour in for the festival, and many preparations were just underway, preparing for the installation, you know, painting the deities, the dresses, so much to do. And there were amazing opportunities for service. I mean, I could tell so much about it. I was happy that my daughter, at least, she honed in on many of them. And on the evening before the installation, there was to be a sneak preview of their lordships. It would be the eye-opening ceremony. And of course, there's videos and photos of all of this, and everyone should see this. Should see this. But when those curtains opened, there was a roar that was outrageous. It seemed to fill the universe. It seemed like there was way more voices roaring than was in that temple room. Everyone was talking about it. It was a roar that just made your hair stand on end. It was no ordinary sound vibration. And then the day of the installation, you know, the excitement was just electric. And I'm not going to try to describe the day. It would be too hard to explain. But you know, it did feel, I have to say, that day and maybe, you know, the days leading up, it felt as if we were just entering straight into Chaitanya Leela. And when the curtains opened and the Abhishek began, it was as if, you know, the curtain of Maya was just slightly lifted for a short time, long enough to show us the bliss that is Panchatattva, and just long enough to give us a little taste, a little glimpse of the glories of Panchatattva. But I do want to describe a moment that I will say changed my life. That as I was watching in just complete awe, as all these beautiful different colors are just pouring over these massive, gorgeous bodies and pouring down onto the altar. And it was like this verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita that Panchatattva was just bursting out, you know, from the nectar of Krishna consciousness, and it just pouring down, pouring out and out onto us and out into the world, you know. And at one moment, I was just looking at Lord Chaitanya's face, and I was suddenly just struck. I mean, really struck, like a shock, that I saw, as if seeing him for the first time. Oh, Srimati Radharani is in you. She's in you. And I felt a burst of joy like I never experienced before or after. I felt like a joy that it was so, I just, like as if I couldn't contain myself. Like I wanted to just jump up and leap up and start going crazy. And I was looking around at everyone, like, do you see what I see? You know? And, you know, it was very brief. It was very brief blessing and mercy, but the most eye-opening, heart-opening, blissful darshan I ever experienced. And I could never, ever forget it. It changed me. And even my whole life, if I had no other experience, that one moment would have made the whole life worthwhile. And, you know, I really did not want that Abhishek to end. I truly did not want to go back to ordinary life, but well, it did come to an end and life did go back, but it wasn't the same. Until that time, although I had lived in Mayapur for many years, I didn't feel like my heart was truly invested there. I felt more attraction and attachment for Vrindavan, you know, however neophyte that attraction was, but it was like suddenly my heart, my consciousness, everything just did a complete flip. And I felt so strongly connected to Mayapur and specifically to Lord Chaitanya and to seeing Radharani within him, that is where she is. And this is where I should see her. And this is where my devotion should focus. So, from that point, Mayapur became my home, where the heart is. And it was a very significant change in my spiritual outlook. And I remember a few days later, I was sitting chanting japa in the morning in front of Panchatattva. They used to have a little time that you could chant japa there, which was really nice. And I was feeling kind of low, not really in very high spirits. But you know, sitting there chanting, and suddenly it was as if Advaita Acharya really just sort of jumped out at me. And I saw, you know, the pose of his arms as if like for the first time. His one arm is just pointed right down at, you know, like he's pointing at Mahaprabhu's feet. And it was as if he was just jumping out and saying, look, look, look at his feet. You know, I brought him down. Look, I brought him down. What more do you want? And it was another one of those like brief, you know, moments when you kind of wake up. And I thought, you know, looking at Advaita Acharya, you know, looking at him with completely new eyes and with interest and with really curiosity, you know, who are you? Who are all of you? Although we say Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur over and over, day after day, year after year. Oh God, it's taken me so many years, and then I go, who are you? So this was sort of a beginning for me of actually really wanting to know and to understand and to learn more about Panchatattva and to devote myself to them. You know, not because I read it or someone told me I should, or but because I had an experience that made me really want to wake up and see what is before me. And personally, I believe that Panchatattva's arrival It was, I think it was a very historic and momentous occasion for the world. It was like Mahaprabhu was just announcing that this is my time, this is my age, and I'm coming into this world in a big way. And that's very exciting. And, you know, there is so much I could, you know, talk for ages about this, but there is a wonderful book that was written by Brajasevaki Dasi about this whole event. It's called 18 Days. And I really urge everyone to read the details of this historical event. The book was written because a few days after the installation, some devotees were in the sewing room recounting their experiences and their realizations about the installation. And I think it was Jananivas who said, you know, somebody should write all of this down. And so Braja, who's an excellent writer, she volunteered to do it. And but when she started the work, it was a little hard to remember what actually happened each day. So she remembered Rasarani had been writing a diary, so she started calling her and asking, you know, what happened on this day. And Rasarani is very clear, and she'd read from her diary. Eventually she said, oh, just send me your whole diary. And so Braja put pretty much the whole diary into the book, which is a very interesting, you know, the perspective of a child, how they see things. I mean, she was 11 or 12, and it's a very unique angle of vision about each deity and, you know, what was going on. So it's all there with really beautiful photos, you know. So this was an event that I'm so grateful that I had this experience. Really, really, really grateful. So after Sridhar Maharaj, he did, indeed, he not only saw the installation, but he so happily participated in it also. And he departed the world some days afterwards on the appearance day of Srivas Thakur. Most auspicious day. And so Sridhar Maharaj, he left the world in the most perfect way, most perfect day, a very happy and very, very blessed devotee. I think I will end there. I don't want it to get too long. And we didn't really finish up to 2005, so maybe continued one more time. Hare Krishna.